Hi guys, so tomorrow we are going to make bread. So that means tonight we are going to make poolish, which is my favorite kind of starter. It's really easy to do. We are just going to get started with this. This is the bin that I use. You can use a shoebox, like a plastic shoebox, a bowl, and cover it. But I am just going to start loading my ingredients in here. I am going to weigh everything, but I will give you the cups as well. So I'm using bread flour, but if you don't have bread flour, you can use all-purpose flour, or you can use a combination of bread flour and whole wheat flour, or bread flour and white flour or rye flour. You can just really do a combination. But for this poolish, I'm going to use 500 grams or 3 3/4 cup of bread flour. And so we're basically just making a dough, and we're going to add just a little bit of yeast in it. And tomorrow we're going to wake up and it's going to be this big, beautiful, bubbly concoction. And you're going to be so excited or so surprised at how bubbly it gets. Okay, so I'm just trying to get my numbers. You don't have to be exact. So I have 500 grams of flour. I'm going to add 500 grams of warm water. This isn't hot. It's just nice and warm. So I'm going to just going to clear out my scale, and I'm going to add another 500 grams of water, or just another 500 grams. Oh, I hope I have enough. Perfect. And then the last thing is just a scant 1/8 of a teaspoon of yeast. So should have gotten them ready. So I'm just going to use my 1/4 teaspoon and just fill it like halfway. And that's all the yeast you need. Now I'm going to just mix it with my hands, and I'm going to cover it and leave it so you can see it's just this thick bread flour. It smells really sweet. And tomorrow morning we're going to wake up and it will have doubled or tripled. It is going to be covered in gassy bubbles, and it's going to smell very sweet. So just mix this up, get all of the flour, mix it with your hands, add some, wild yeast from your hands, cover it up and leave it on their counter. It needs to sit for 12 to 14 hours. So we'll be right back here tomorrow making this into bread. Stop. So here is the poolish. This is the starter that we're using for this white bread with poolish. It has been hanging out on my counter for about 14 hours. I made it last night before bed, and I'm going to make it into bread this afternoon. Notice all the bubbles, all of the gassy bubbles. So, in our poolish container, we are going to mix the dough. Now, once we start mixing the dough, it's going to start a process called bulk fermentation, or the first rise. And excuse me, that process is only going to take about 2 hours, the bulk rise. And that's because we have so much poolish. In other bread recipes that you might have read in the past, you only use like a cup or 200 grams of a starter, and the bulk fermentation is longer. But because we have so much poolish, we have so much fermenting bread, our bulk rise does not need to be as long. So let's go ahead and get started in mixing the dough. So to get started making our bread, we need a mixing bowl. You need the poolish. You need a 1 1/8 cup, or about 250 grams of very warm water, not scalding hot, but warmer than room temperature. We need some salt, bread flour, and yeast. So the first thing that we're going to do when we make to mix for the bread is to dump our water into the poolish. Now this is all going to be combined together, but dump your water there. Next, I'm going to use a scale, but I can give you cup measurements too. The next thing we want to do is get 500 grams of 500 grams of flour, which is about 3 3/4 cups of flour. And so I'm just gonna put it in here. Oops. So the total flour for our bread is gonna be 1,000 grams. So we have 500 grams in the Poolish, and we're gonna have 500 grams mixed into the final dough. Okay, just a little bit more. So we're gonna mix our dry ingredients. Okay, so I have 500 grams of flour. I need 20 grams of salt. So I'm just gonna reset my thing and get 20 grams of salt and oops, there we go. And 20 grams of salt is about a tablespoon. Then I need 3/4 of a teaspoon of yeast. So I'm just gonna take my teaspoon and get 3/4, and it's about 3 grams or 3/4 of a teaspoon. There we go. And then that's all of the dry ingredients. So we have flour, yeast, and salt. I'm gonna mix it up, and then I'm going to dump the Poolish in. It should all be this big gloppy mess. Here, I'm gonna get a scraper. I have just a scraper or a spatula that you can use, and combine it all into the bowl here. So I'm gonna mix with my hands at first, and we just wanna get everything incorporated. Now again, this is starting the bulk rise, and so I like using this big bowl because I know that it's all going to it's going to grow and get higher. And again, this bulk rise time is about 2 hours, 2.5 hours at most, because there's so much fermentation happening because of the Poolish. So I'm just gonna pull this dough together. I'm gonna mix it with one hand. Okay, so my dough has been in the bulk rise for about 30 or 40 minutes, and I want to show you what my dough looks like and the folding process. Okay, so here's the dough. It's come together. It's almost smooth on top, but you know, it's getting there. It's still sticky, but not nearly as sticky as it was before. So I have wet my hand because the water will help it not be as sticky. And I reach to the bottom, and I'm stretching up the dough, and I'm folding it over. Trying to do this all while I film is hard, but I stretch it up and I fold it over. And we just need to do this a couple of times during the first hour. And what it does is just it builds up the gluten so that the bread can hold its shape longer. So that's pretty much it. You go around all 4 sides, cover it back up with the towel, and then we'll be ready to shape it in about an hour or so. All right, so our dough was in our big bowl with the cover over it for about 2 hours. Then I dumped it out, and I divided it into approximately 2. Clearly, they're not the same size. But what I want to show you how to do is to divide and shape your dough for the final rise. You're going to need a little bit of flour on your surface. You don't need a ton, but you're going to put your dough down, and we're going to do the stretching again, where you take kind of all the corners and you fold it onto itself. This is so that the bread will rise in the oven. It's called oven spring. And then you flip it over on its side and put it on a place where you're on your counter that doesn't have a lot of flour, and you want to pull the bread to you so it sticks a little. You press down a little, and this is called shaping it. So we want to just get some tension along the top of the dough, and so you kind of press down and pull towards you, and then the dough underneath catches, and it forms this lovely tight bowl. Once you have folded and shaped both of your doughs, you can leave them on your counter, cover them with a towel. They need to do the final rise for about an hour to an hour and a half. And now is a great time to turn on your oven to 475 and put whatever you're cooking your bread in at the same time. I'm using a stock pot or a Dutch oven, so that's in the oven getting hot, but you can also just put your pizza stone in and cook it on a pizza stone. So 475, let it sit for about an hour, get the oven hot, and we'll see it for the bake. Okay, so our dough balls have been resting underneath this linen cloth for about an hour now. And I think they're ready to go in the oven. There is one surefire test to see if the dough has been proved well enough. And if you can get a little bit closer, Isaac, I'm gonna show you. If you take a floured finger and poke it into the side of the dough, if it takes a little bit of time to pop back up, or if it still holds its indentation, it's perfectly proved and it's ready to go in the oven. So I have a couple of quick things to show you about how to decorate your bread for the oven. I'm gonna put a little bit of flour on each of them, and I'm gonna show you two different techniques that I like to use. The first one, I'm gonna move the dough just a little bit over here. The first one is really easy. I just take a rolling pin and I cut it in the center, and I go all the way down as far as I can go and roll back and forth. This produces a really pretty shape once it bakes. The other thing that I like to do is I have it's called a lame. It's just a razor blade, or you can take a sharp knife or just a razor blade that you have in your hand and slice it. This is good because it will help get the air out. And I do not make beautiful designs like a lot of people do, but I just cut down there really quick like that. And then I'll maybe make a little bit of, try to make a little bit of a design, make a little star shape over here or whatever. And now these guys are ready to go into the oven. Now I'm gonna show you how I bake them in just a sec. Okay, so I pull my steaming hot pan out of the oven, and I'm gently just going to place this loaf in the oven. I don't need to put anything down. I don't need to put oil or anything down. And I'm just gonna put it in the pan, put the top on, and I'm gonna bake it at 475 for 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, I'm gonna take the lid off, and I'm gonna cook it for another 15 or 20 minutes, simply depending on how dark I want it. I like my bread really dark brown, so I'm gonna probably go for an additional 20 minutes after I take the lid off. But if you like yours a little bit lighter, then you can pull the bread out at 15 minutes. So if you don't have a two-piece Dutch oven or anything like this, you can put the loaf directly on your pizza stone and then put a dish, like a 9x13 dish of water in the oven. We need this steam to form a nice crust and to let the dough rise. So here is the bread once I take it out of the oven. I like that dark brown and little kind of with black specks. You can see this is the one that I sliced, and I tried to do the little pretty design. It doesn't really come through, and I don't really know why. But this is what the bread looks like when it comes out. So I just sliced into one loaf of baked bread, and look at that crumb. The crumb is the inside of the bread. Look at all of those holes. Look how nice and crisp the crust is. This is going to be a delicious loaf of bread.